The works of our father Abraham. We're going to have an opportunity to explore yet again. As a reminder, if you've been watching the Aliyah regularly, you're going to hear something that is repeated, but it's repeated on purpose because we need to hear it. We're going to be learning about the works of our father Abraham. What does that mean? And contrast that with what people are usually taught, which is completely wrong, and bring clarity to our lives. So good morning. Glad you're here. Please subscribe to our channel. Please make sure you hit the bell so that you're kept up to date on everything that's going on around here. And like this video, share with your friends, leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think. And as I've been asking people, if you enjoy the content of this channel, if it means something to you, if it's helpful and grows you in any way, I'm asking you to please contribute to us. There are, in the description of this video and in all of our videos, there are ways in which you can contribute to Lapid Judaism. I think there may be even a link to the synagogue as well. Either way, whether you contribute specifically to Lapid Judaism or the synagogue or what have you, both of those situations are tax deductible. Fully creditable tax deductible donation. So there's that. If you want a tax donation, you can do that as well. But I'm asking you to contribute, to support us, to help us. Can you imagine if everybody would just donate $18 or $56 or $100, what we could do to make sure that the light of Lapid Judaism reaches the entire world? It's amazing. I'm asking you for your support. Remember also our scheduling program. Rabbi and I will be away for a couple of weeks, and in the interim, there will be guest hosts for the Aliyah. Looking very much forward to that. I'm excited about that. We have 4 men who are going to be taking the Aliyah for the next couple of weeks. Both of our Zakins, our Hazan, and Daniel Dennis, who serves in our Gabai capacity. And so it's going to be great. And so I'll be posting. I intended to post a link, not a link, but a message yesterday to kind of put that schedule out there. But I'll take care of that today. Also, with respect to our Hazan, he's going to be doing the Aliyah in Spanish. We have a lot of Spanish speakers out there, people who are bilingual, and then some people who Spanish just works better for them. And so he's going to be doing the Aliyah in Spanish. I'm excited about that because we're going to begin to have more and more Spanish content on the channel. And so that's exciting because there's lots of people in the Latino world that need to hear this message, and hereunto there hasn't been an outlet for that. So with Yehuda's help and perhaps the help of others down the line, we will be able to put content out there in Spanish. Maybe even yours truly might be able to do a little something, probably not very well, but we'll make it happen some way or the other to make sure that we will get that information out there. It's going to be amazing. I'm very excited about that, actually. So yeah. All right. So let's look at our message today, our learning today, our Aliyah today, because now we have Isaac, who's been married off, and then Sarah has passed away, and now Abraham is well on in years, and he's in his nearly mid hundreds here, and he ends up taking another wife, which is fairly remarkable, actually. You think about a man who's that old. He's a widower. Basically, it's his life is the sun is setting on his life. His righteous wife Sarah, has passed away. But remarkably, he takes another woman as a wife, and he ends up having a lot more children. And remarkably, in this latter stage of his life, he ends up fathering several natural children with this new wife, whose name is Keturah. Now, there's differences of opinion about Keturah, her identity. Some, I think I would venture to say, perhaps the majority view, is that Keturah is really none other than Hagar. But what happened in Hagar's life is that after this episode, she decided to make teshuvah and to go through a full conversion, as it were. And she took upon herself a new name, the name Keturah. And the Keturah means, it's actually from the Hebrew word ketoret, which is talking about the fragrant incense, the Ketoret offering. So that's the root of Keturah. That's what Keturah means. It means fragrant incense, fragrant spices. And so the majority idea is that this is indeed Hagar. And so Hagar and Abraham reconnect after the passing of Sarah, and now she's Keturah. She's a bit closer, as it were, to the things of God. This makes sense in my opinion, because I don't, the other idea. Let me just say this first. The other idea is that Hagar is just a Canaanite woman that Abraham marries. And some of the commentators who believe that, such as Rabbeinu Bachya and Ramban, they say don't be surprised at that, because now that Isaac is married off, and even though he didn't want Isaac to marry a Canaanite woman, and there's all this commentary about the fact that Canaanites were just debased people, but now that the lineage has been secured, Isaac has married Rebekah, it's not really such a big deal. Well, in my opinion, I don't think so, because I just can't imagine that here you have a father who doesn't want his son to marry a Canaanite woman because they're just such a debased culture, but yet he himself is going to marry a Canaanite woman. I just find that frankly hard to believe. And secondly, it makes sense that Keturah would in fact be Hagar, because Abraham had feelings for Hagar. He didn't like, he wasn't, remember that he wasn't all that happy about the way that whole situation unfolded. But he was instructed by HaShem to listen to Sarah. And ultimately it was Sarah's will, or what she was wanting was right. In either case, we have a situation now where Abraham is now married to Keturah after his wife has passed away. And so the sages talk about this on one level and say that it's not good for a man to be alone. This is because of thoughts of impurity and other issues, even at an older age. And again, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the fact that the sages talk about man, the male of our species, that he has to have a wife in his life, and it's an important factor. And a man cannot fully live out a Torah life if he's single. And now it doesn't necessarily apply to women, and that's an interesting dynamic. But now that's not to say that women don't need a husband. It's I think for everybody to be complete. But the sages point out that there's a different dynamic at play between men and women, and men really, in order for a man to fully live a Torah life, he really needs to have a wife in his life. And so there's that, but there's also a deeper point, and that is that, as we're going to find out, Abraham, when his wife passed away and now Isaac is married off, he didn't retire. He continued his mission. And as followers of HaShem, as followers of Messiah Yeshua, we have to understand that our mission is never over. We're never going to retire from our mission. And that's what our life is all about. Our life is about our mission, and all the other things in our life are frankly, it's not so much that they're not important, but to a large extent, they're distractions. A lot of people are distracted. They're distracted from what they were sent on this planet to accomplish. You and I were sent here to accomplish a mission. And what we're going to see with Abraham is that his mission doesn't die. His mission doesn't go to rest. Just because Isaac has now been given the mantle of continuing on the ministry, Abraham continues. And all of this has lessons for us. As we're going to find out, we'll be looking at, as I put in the title here, the works of our Father. Our Father is talking about Abraham, who is the model that we are to follow. And we need to find out what were his works, what were his deeds, and we need to do those very things. And yes, it includes what most people think, which is faith. That's all well and good. But faith is just the beginning, ladies and gentlemen. Faith is just the beginning. You can't have, everything that we do requires faith. That seems kind of simplistic enough, but there's this idea that faith is all that you need, or all that once you arrive there. There's this idea, ladies and gentlemen, that exists amongst people, and it's really quite ridiculous. And that is that if you could be living a fully religious life but not really have full faith. It's like, well, that's not. I mean, I can see there is this phenomenon where some people are fakers and phonies, and that certainly is true. I've seen my fair share of that. But at the same time, do we really go all in on something when we don't have any faith at all? I mean, because that seems kind of counterintuitive to the psyche. So it's the point, in fact, is it's not, faith is just where we begin. It's not where we end. For a lot of people, it's the end of the journey. Once you have faith, that's it. Move on to something else. And that's not really healthy at all. I also want to share something that has been sitting in front of me for a little while, several days here, talking about, because we have talked about the importance of circumcision. And it's interesting to me because we talked about in the past. Look at the things that are opposed, right? Circumcision is opposed. Keeping the Sabbath is opposed. And we talked about the fact that circumcision itself is a very mystical act. It's a very mystical religious symbol. It just like with kosher, like we talk about kosher eating. Some people talk about, kosher eating has to do with health, and a lot of people, it's very common for people to have the erroneous teaching that, well, the reason that the people of Israel were given kosher laws way back when is because we didn't have refrigeration, or we didn't know how to properly prepare things. And in fact, this question came up in our class this last week. One of the people present asked that very question, kind of saying, well, wasn't these laws given because we didn't know how to properly prepare food or what have you? And so kind of insinuated it was for our health. And the answer to that is no. Secondly, it's a very common question. I understand why it's asked, because it is taught erroneously that this is the case. But if you really think about it, it's really quite ridiculous. We act as if the people in antiquity were a bunch of Neanderthal cave people who, oh, fire, good, oh, look, oh. And the reality is, they weren't. I mean, we talk about the libraries of Alexandria. We talk about the immense work that was done amongst the Egyptians, the pyramids. In fact, Rabbi was just reading an article not too long ago about an ancient tablet that was found, I want to say, in Mesopotamia, in that region, like ancient Iraq. And so I think it was Babylonian, maybe. I may be getting the kingdom mixed up here, but it was from one of those cultures way back when. And the tablet was trigonometry, and mathematicians studying it have found that it was not only just trigonometry, but it was perfect trigonometry. So listen, guys, back in, we're talking, we on the one hand, we're like, well, the reason we can't eat shrimp and pork is we just didn't know how to prepare it right. And on the other hand, we're talking about cultures that built pyramids, that had exhaustive libraries, that were doing calculus and trig perfectly, but we couldn't figure out how to cook shrimp. I mean, come on. It's just kind of silly. Not to mention the fact that the refrigerator has only been around since the 20th century. So the reality is, contrary to popular belief, these people were a lot smarter than we were. Actually, we are in a lot of ways. So when it comes to kosher eating, kosher is not about health at all. It's about holiness. Even though you could argue that, hey, look, shrimp is bad for you, pork is bad for you. All that's true, but that's not the reason. Milk and dairy mixed together in your system wreaks havoc. That's a scientific fact. Hey, can I tell you something? Couple of things right quick on that point, if you don't mind me deviating for just a minute. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I had a friend of ours come in from India he lives in India and he works all over the world. Now he works in Austria, Austria, and beautiful Austria. And I'm not holding that against him much. But anyway, he came into town. Back in those days, he was eating, kosher, but he still wasn't separating meat and milk because he had been taught in the Messianic world erroneously that it was a rabbinical tradition or custom to separate meat and dairy, and that it wasn't Torah, which is completely and utterly false. But anyway, he had been taught that, and of course, I was explaining to him how that was incorrect. It's not. It is actually written Torah. It is not a rabbinic tradition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I talked to him about it. And then I mentioned to him that just so happens that the digestion of meat and milk requires different enzymes in the human system. And so when you combine those two things together in your system, it wreaks havoc because basically it's not digesting properly because it's offsetting. And so I said, now that's not the reason why we have this mitzvah, but it just so happens that is in fact a fact. Well, he didn't really say anything to me, but on his next visit, he said, Rabbi, I took what you said to heart and I discontinued mixing meat and dairy together. And he said, all of my life, I've had these digestive problems. And he said, ever since I stopped mixing, I started separating. He said, my digestive problems went away. In a similar vein, I was giving a tour at the Tarrant County Sheriff's Office, taking a tour of their commissary because they were wanting me to help them identify kosher, non-kosher, etc. And on that tour, I had the sheriff and I had a bunch of other high officials with us, and there were some other deputies going through the commissary. And I was explaining to the group about the hechshers and so forth. And I was mentioning this very thing about separation and how you can tell it has dairy together or if a product has meat in it, or whether it has dairy together. If it has meat in it, you should serve an inmate juice and not milk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I explained this concept about, by the way, the two things, the two enzymes. And so a couple of months later, I was at the sheriff's headquarters again, and I just happened to be there. And this deputy walked around the corner. He goes, "Hey, Rabbi, by the way, you don't know me, but I was there when you were giving that tour and that lecture. And I want you to know that I've had digestive problems. And ever since I heard you talk about that, my wife and I no longer mix dairy products with meat products. And ever since then, my system is working like a charm." And I just thought that was a pretty neat testimonies. Again, it's not why we do it. It's not the reason for it. It's not health. But there's that. Same thing with going back to circumcision. I was going to give you this insight. Circumcision is mystical. And even though a man who is circumcised, remarkably, his wife will be less prone to certain infections and so forth. And studies have proven that circumcision reduces the risk of AIDS and so forth, or HIV. But nevertheless, it's still a supernatural act. It doesn't really have an understanding outside the supernatural. And to that point, when it talks about Eliezer going to find Rebecca, it says he will send his angel before you. And Rabbi Monk says this. He says an optative expression, a wish, explains the Zohar. Although Abraham had already made Eliezer swear, he had no confidence in the success of his mission until he had implored Hashem to send aid. May God send you his angel. Now, the angel who watches over the covenant with Abraham is the angel about which he was speaking. And this angel is the angel, it says here, of the sacred insignia, which is circumcision. As a result, the word milah, which is a circumcision, can be formed from the initial letters of the four words Hu Yeshalach Malakot Lefaneka. That when it says he shall send his angel before you, the first letters of those four words spell the word milah, spell the word circumcision. So it just so happens that the angel that was sent to aid Eliezer in his way was the angel that was overseeing the sacred symbol of circumcision. I just want to bring this down to you. So one of the works of Abraham, our father, was that he got circumcised, that he embraced not just the covenant in its theory, but the covenant in its reality. Now, there are those who suggest that, oh, we don't need these physical signs. We don't need this kind of stuff. And yet at the same time, if you say to them, well, then why did you get water baptized? Yeah, well, why? That's a physical sign. Do you wear a cross? Well, yeah, well, take it off. You don't need that. See, we contradict ourselves, right? And there's many other things that we do like that. Now, going back to chapter 25, very interestingly, I find this so interesting, where it says, and Abraham proceeded and took a wife whose name was Keturah. The Hebrew of this passage, if you look at the Hebrew in chapter 25 and verse 1, it says, Vayosef. Notice what I just said here. Vayosef Avraham, Vayikach Isha, Ushma Keturah. Ushma Keturah. So notice the first word. I just think this is interesting. But because the word for and he proceeded or he continued is the word Vayosef, which if you take that word Vayosef, the vav in this case is the word basically to insinuate and, like a continuance, okay? But if you look at those four letters, the vav, the yod, the samik, and the peh sofit, that is the word Yosef. All you would have to do is flip the yod and the vav to spell the proper name Yosef. So I think there's an allusion here in the Torah that when it's talked, because this whole section ultimately on a more sod level is talking about the continuation of Abraham's mission and the mission of Abraham, which is to bring the nations into Judaism, to see them converted. He was not making Noahides. That is so absurd. The Noahide thing is a phony baloney, plastic banana, good time rock and roll farce. He wasn't making so-called Messianic Gentiles. There's no such thing. The Messianic Gentiles, you can find them when you find Sasquatch and the Loch Ness Monster. They all hang out together. Oh, and flying unicorns. Those three things, flying unicorns, Sasquatch, Loch Ness Monster, and Messianic Gentiles are all together. And when you spot them, then you know they exist. Until then, it's a fairy tale. So Yosef it's all rooted in Yosef. Well, who's Yosef? What's the symbol of Yosef? The symbol of Yosef is the suffering Messiah, Messiah Yeshua. So it says here that despite the loss of his wife, despite the fact that Isaac has gone, found a wife, and Isaac has started his mission to continue his father's work. It says, even so, Vayosef, Abraham continued. He continued to seek out pagans to bring them in to Torah. And I love what this passage, this is another commentary here, what it says. Now, I want to mention before I read this, in the book of Yochanan, John, chapter 8 and verse 39. The people said to Yeshua, Abraham is our father. And Yeshua replied to them and said, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the work of Abraham. Now, the question is, what's the work of Abraham? And I'm going to tell you, we're going to read it here in just a second. But I happened to go, when I was looking something up earlier, I happened to stumble across a Christian, ask the pastor type page. And the question was put, what are the works of Abraham? And I just want to read this to you, this answer. It was a long article, but this was the summation of it. And you tell me if this is what you've been taught in the past. And then you tell me I want you to tell me what you think of this in the comments. It says so what are the works of Abraham? The pastoral response is they are believing and being fully persuaded that God will deliver on his promises. So the Christian response is the works of Abraham are just believing and knowing, having confidence in the fact that God will deliver on what he's promised. That's the works of Abraham. Really? So when Yeshua said, if Abraham was really your father, then you'd be doing his works. Okay, define works. Works is just believing and knowing that God will do what he said he would do. That's it, really? Really? I'm going to suggest to you that everybody Yeshua was talking to believed that God would fulfill his promises. I'm going to suggest to you that everybody Yeshua was talking to probably had faith that God was God and that he would do what he said to do. Does that seem shallow to you? I'm asking sincerely. Let's find out what actually the works of Abraham were. God tells us, actually. Because he says to Isaac, it's in the next chapter, I think, chapter 26, if I'm not mistaken. He tells Isaac, and come on, where is it? That I'm going to bless you, right? He says, it is chapter 26. Chapter 6 and verse 5. I'm going to bless you because Abraham obeyed my voice, observed my safeguards, my commandments, my decrees, and my Torah. In other words, there's more than one Torah, the two Torahs. He does not tell Isaac that I'm going to bless you because your father believed me and counted me faithful to fulfill my promises. That's not what he says. He says, I'm blessing you because your father Abraham obeyed my commandments. He obeyed my laws. He obeyed my Torahs. And so in this comment, it says, by virtue of his missionary spirit, reinforced by an extraordinary intelligence and eloquence, and through his love of others, his kindness, and his hospitality, Abraham had succeeded in converting entire nations to this new faith. This was the word. Ultimately, the work of Abraham is what I just read. It was a missionary effort, guided by intelligence and eloquence, fueled by his love of other people, impassioned by his kindness and his hospitality, that led people to the one true God. That, my friends, is the work of the Father. And when we talk about Torah observance, and this is important what I'm about to tell you right now, because it can get lost in the sauce and confused. Ultimately, Abraham's Torah observance was in order to reach people. That's the point. It says, it goes on to say that although he knew that, because he has a prophetic spirit, he knew that his children with Keturah were not going to be as spiritually bright as Isaac. And in fact, unfortunately, within a generation or two, they desisted in their pursuit of the one true God, and they got back into idolatry. That's unfortunate. But it says, nevertheless, he believed that they were capable of carrying his divine message to still other pagan peoples, And therefore, listen to this. As soon as they grew up, Abraham sent the children to far off lands of Asia. So now we're learning that Abraham actually said, go into all the world and preach this gospel, baptize them in the name of Yeshua. We didn't really say that per se, but what he said was, he said, go out, go teach them the Torah. Teach the nations, just like Yeshua said. Yeshua said, go and teach the nations to follow the commandments. That's what Yeshua said. That's the Great Commission. He didn't say go teach them to believe. He said go teach them to do. By the way, when it talks about the city of Nineveh, it says God saw their deeds and relented. He didn't say he saw their faith. He said he saw their deeds. Why? Because faith is worthless without doing something. All of us know this, right? We all know there's a saying, right? That it's what you do. You can say you love me all you want, but unless you start showing it, I don't believe it. I mean, that's so simple. Yet when it comes to God, we believe the exact opposite. But when it comes to us, we don't buy it. So it says here, he was aware that these children born of foreign mothers could not be messengers of his doctrine in all of its purity, but still he understood that the first rays of light which they would carry to these regions, still spiritually in darkness, would gradually disperse the shadows of night to make way for the radiant brightness of truth. It goes on to say, the one who had known so many disappointments in his missionary activity, even with those very close to him, never let himself be overcome by feelings of discouragement. Man, I tell you right now, guys, I don't know about you, but that sentence I just read hits right on the bullseye of my heart. Let me just read this again. This is a little bit self-serving here because I relate so much to this. It says, the one who had known so many disappointments in his missionary activity, even with those very close to him, never let himself be overcome by feelings of discouragement. Wow. Man, there have been so many people in my life through the last 25 years that I had such high hopes for, and they didn't continue. I'm still here. I'm still here through it all, through the fire, through the water, through the stumblings, through the face plant. I'm still here. Thank God. Thank God. It's all God, by the way. It's not because I'm anybody special, but God. Saved for God. Saved for the grace of God. I'm still here by the grace of God. But there are many, many people that I have preached to and taught, and some have sat at my table in my very home and eaten my bread and learned. We've learned together, and they are no longer doing anything at all. They're gone. But you know what, guys? We just got to keep going. There is nothing. It's just terrible. I can't express how just that is. But I read this sentence and I think we just got to keep going. You just got to keep going. You just have to keep going and let God work it out. And he quotes here in Hebrew, Vayosef Avram. Avraham continued. Man, I'm about to throw my book across the room. We just got to continue. Just keep punching. Keep punching. You know, like Rabbi said in her class, when people trying to drag you down and whatever, just ignore them. They are hashtag irrelevant. I'm sorry to say that. I wish it wasn't true, but they are. They're hashtag irrelevant. They are distractions. Abraham had lots of disappointments. Think about it. His own nephew just left the faith. Boom. All these children he's teaching, he knows that eventually they're going to leave the faith, and yet he just keeps going. Thus, it says, this becomes the motto of his life. And these two words, Vayosef Avraham served to introduce the chapter which relates Abraham's death. They contain the message which he addressed to all his descendants beyond the grave. Abraham's perseverance triumphed over all obstacles and ultimately won over humanity to the truth of monotheism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why no matter what happens in your life, don't ever quit. Don't ever give up. I don't care if the hounds of hell, if people are screaming at you, that people are all over the internet, people are all over social media, they're just calling all your friends and family and demanding that you give up. Been there. But don't quit. Don't ever give up. Those people, they have issues. As they say in England, issues. They have more issues than Vogue magazine, okay? You were called to this planet for a mission. You were called here to do ultimately the works of your father Abraham. Maybe in a slightly different way, but ultimately it's still the same mission that he had. This is what Yeshua did. Yeshua came to do the work of Abraham, to ultimately pave the way for the whole world to become believers. And so, Vayosef Avraham, Vayosef, think about Yosef, the suffering Messiah, the suffering brother who went to Egypt. He never gave up, no matter what happened to him. He never gave up. And so the works of Abraham are vast. Missionary, evangelism, doing Torah, living Torah, and finally, never quitting. Don't ever give up. Don't ever quit. Don't ever quit. Keep punching, because if you won't quit, then you cannot, listen to me, you cannot be defeated. End of our Aliyah today. Thank you so much for being here. Like this video, share with your friends, subscribe to our channel, contribute. Please contribute. If you like what has been taught here, if you feel encouraged or inspired, then take this opportunity and join with us financially and help us keep everything going. It's people like you that help us spread the light of Messiah Yeshua and the real true gospel to the whole world. Listen, have a great prep day. Shabbat shalom to all of you. I look forward to seeing you in the synagogue tomorrow. And I'm excited that you get to hear from some great guys who are going to be teaching the Aliyah in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. And that's who you'll see beginning next Monday. So God bless all of you. Look forward to seeing you in shul tomorrow. Until then, have a great and blessed prep day. Shalom Aleichem.